Today I want to give my 1-year review on the Yeswelder Mig-205DS and tell you why I think it's a great welder for the beginner, a hobby welder, or even a pro. So let's dive right in. Hey guys, my name's Dan. So I bought this welder exactly 1 year ago this week. So I thought, what better time to give it an honest review of how it's performed for me over the last year and how it's holding up. The Yeswelder Mig-205DS is a multi-process, multi-voltage welder, which will set you back give or take $400 or just over. It has a whole lot of features that you don't normally find in this price range, and that is part of why I bought mine. So you might wonder at this price, is this welder gonna last or is it gonna crap out? And what I can tell you is over the year of using it, abusing it, and proving it met my expectations, that I am flat out impressed for what you get for the money. And over the last year, I've gotten a good enough grasp on the machines, its features, its limitations, that I feel confident in giving it a full review. So the majority of my review is going to be based on the MIG function, as that's what I mostly use it for myself, and that's what this welder is designed to be, is a MIG welder. But I have also used the arc and TIG functions, and I will show you some welds with all three a little bit later in the video. So I think this is a great welder for anyone, but especially someone who is just learning how to weld. Now, while they did forget to put a chart in here to give out, the synergetic function actually is really useful in getting this thing set up pretty close to properly, and the charts are available online. I'll put a link to it down below, and that way you can download it and print it out if you want to. So I also think this welder is a great fit for a hobby welder, a home fabricator, or someone who's into metal art or things like that. You get a whole ton of versatility with the different processes, and I have yet to come across a job that the welder couldn't handle other than, like I said, aluminum. So how is this welder for the professional welder or fabricator? Other than the lack of being able to do aluminum with it, I still think it's a great welder for anyone, even if you just pick one of these up as a backup machine. It's really functional. Now, Yeswelder also has a machine called the Mig-250 Pro, and at this time it's only about $100 more than this machine, and you can do aluminum with it and all that kind of stuff. It has a whole lot more options, so that's another option that's worth looking into. Some people might question whether or not the 205DS will hold up to everyday use and abuse. While I didn't use it every day, I used it a whole lot over the last year. I've ran about 3 10-pound spools worth of wire through it. I'm on the 4th one right now. For me, it has survived welding continuously for hours on end. It has survived living in this cold garage here in Iowa, and it gets really hot and humid here in the summer, and I have not had any problems with it yet, other than the minor little stupid things like the nozzle melting and stuff like that. So I haven't heard any stories of these failing yet, but with it coming from overseas, that's kind of a gamble, but that's just the world we live in now. So I'm going to do this review a little bit backwards, and I'm going to jump straight into some things that I don't like about this welder. It's kind of like skipping to the 1-star reviews on Amazon, am I right? So the first thing that I don't like is that it's all in metric. I guess for the rest of the world this is fine. They're wrong. Okay, I'm giving it a hard time. It's mostly the material thickness selection on the machine and the drive rolls that come in metric, and we'll talk more about that thickness setting here in a little bit. The second downside that I noticed was the nozzle that came on the MIG gun. The copper nozzle that came on this MIG gun, it has like a plastic or Teflon insert in between the threads and the copper, and I ended up melting it, and the copper literally just slid right off of here, and it was probably my fault because I was welding for hours on end, and I had this thing turned almost all the way up because it was when I was welding my axle truss. I would imagine that melting these tips isn't a common thing. I was kind of abusing the limits of the welder, and it was likely my fault, and it also hasn't happened since. So it probably won't happen to you, but it can happen if you like really put this thing through its paces. The third thing I didn't care for too much was this flimsy ground clamp / work lead that it came with. So after quite a bit of use, the copper or mesh cable that's in here, it started fraying and actually ended up breaking. So I ended up replacing it with a much heavier duty clamp. I'll put a link in the description to this one. I got it on Amazon. It was like maybe 20 bucks. It's not to say this thing's so bad that you can't use it. It's just a little bit on the flimsy side, and after you use it quite a bit, or if you like put it all the way onto your table like that and run into this cable, more than likely you're gonna start fraying it and need to replace it. So number 4, the fan's kind of loud. So this fan runs at full blast whether you're welding or not. And it'd be nice if when you pulled the trigger and started welding, the fan would ramp up, and when you weren't welding, that it would ramp down a little bit. It's not terribly loud. I guess it's mostly a gripe for me because the camera seems to pick it up better than it does my voice. So the fifth downside is lack of aluminum support on TIG and MIG or a spool gun. So it would definitely be nice if you could use a spool gun with this thing, or even flip the TIG over to AC so that you could do aluminum, but unfortunately that's not the case. You can, however, weld aluminum with the stick welder function if you get the right rod. We're actually going to talk about this a little bit later in the video. And lastly, number 6, there's no settings chart printed on the door and the instructions are kind of lousy. So I can't imagine that it would cost them that much to print out a chart on the door like every other welder on the market. So what I did is I went to the web and I found this one when I first got the welder, and this one was a user-made chart, which honestly I don't follow it very well. I don't really like the settings on it that much. But then this one here appears to actually be made by Yeswelder. So if they've taken the time to make a chart, I don't get why they couldn't just throw one in the box. Keep in mind that the chart is basically a baseline for your settings anyway, but it gets you in the ballpark. So also the directions that come with this thing leave a little bit to be desired. I can only imagine that's due to language barriers or whatnot, but the good news is this thing isn't rocket science, so you really don't need them anyway. So now that I'm done beating up on the welder, I promise you it's a great welder and the pros definitely outweigh the cons. So I wanted to point out that Yeswelder did not send me this welder for free, nor did they pay me to do a review on it. They did, however, give me a discount code to give to my viewers, and that is Flawedoffroad with no space. That'll save you 10% on anything they sell on their website. I'll put that down in the description below also. And if you decide to pick one of these up, you can save a little bit of money. So the reason that I started with the cons and the negatives of this welder is so that you can see that this isn't just some biased review with a bunch of sunshine and rainbows and unicorn farts. Well, it is chilly night. It's time to talk about all the good that you get with this machine and some of my favorite features. The first one is that this Mig-205DS is dual voltage. I love the flexibility that comes with that. If I want to take it somewhere else and use it somewhere that doesn't have 220 power, or somewhere else in the yard, or even to another location, I can do that. I've used it on both 110 and 220, but mostly with 220. The welder works really good on your standard household 110 power. You just have to be aware of the limitations that come with that, which I believe it tops out at 165 amps. On 220, I've personally welded up to 3/8 material. Now technically this machine isn't rated to do that, but rating schmating. My second favorite feature of this welder is that it is a multi-process machine. And what that means is that in addition to being a wire feed welder, you can also stick weld and you can TIG weld. So while neither one of those functions is going to work quite as good as a dedicated TIG or arc machine, they're very usable and it adds a ton of flexibility to this welder. Now it does come with the arc stinger in the box, but if you want to try your hand at TIG, you're going to have to buy the torch separately, which this is it right here. And while you're at it, I recommend getting the stubby gas lens kit, which it's only like $20-ish. And that leads me to number 3, value. You really can't beat the amount of versatility that you get for just over $400. And that's a heck of a deal for a multi-process welder. So hey guys, do me a favor, if this video is helping you out, click that little thumbs up down there. It helps the channel grow and it also helps more people see this video. So moving on to number 4, this is also a synergetic welder. And what that means is that as you change one setting, the other settings kind of follow along. And this takes a lot of the guesswork out of the setup, especially if you are a beginner or if you can't always remember what settings worked really good for you last time. So on this machine, I kind of treat the amps like it's the wire feed speed. And then this is your voltage. So as the dial controls the amps by default and the voltage will change with it. Now, alternatively, you can set this on a number and then push this button until that lights up and you can go plus or minus 10 on the volts. It's not actually 10 volts, it's just an arbitrary number. And you can also do the same with inductance, which I'll talk about more later. But you remember my metric gripe from earlier? You can also set this up by material thickness by this number right here, and that's in millimeters. And as you turn that up, it turns everything else up. Now, for some reason, it caps out at 4.2 when I'm on MIG argon and 035, but that puts it at max amps. I could honestly make a whole video on just the settings. In fact, if you would like a dedicated video on all the different settings, what they do, and how I use them, let me know down in the comments below. I'd be happy to cover all that in a separate video. Number 5, I had just mentioned inductance, and that is one of my favorite bonuses that come with this welder. So what exactly is inductance? I'm no scientist, but in layman's terms, my native language, it basically changes how flowy your weld pool is. So if you want a weld that like spreads out real nice and wide and flat, you turn the setting up. Likewise, if you're like welding vertical or overhead or something and you don't want it dripping and running all over the place, you turn it down. And all I can say is it's a really nice addition to a machine, and you very rarely are gonna see it down in this price point. So this is how you change the inductance. You hit this button a couple times until it lights up right there, and you've got your base setting 0, and you can go plus or minus 10. So the last thing I wanted to mention is the compact size and weight of this thing. It measures in about 18 inches long, about 14 inches high to the handle, and then about 8 inches wide. It's actually a little bit less than those measurements, and it only weighs about 23 pounds with none of the attachments hooked up. So most of the welding footage I've showed so far is me using this Yeswelder to build stuff for my Jeep. And in case you're wondering how it's all holding up, well, let's just say that I've been beating on it a little bit and nothing has broken yet. All right, so now it's time to fire this baby up, and I'll give you a live demo of all the processes and a few of the settings that are on here. Also, if you want to see more about that Jeep I just showed you, consider taking a look at some of my other videos after you finish this one, of course. So this is going to be on 110, and this is just 1/8 inch steel. I'm just going to do a couple T-joints. I'm on 125 amps. Can you see that? So just to confirm, 125, and I'm plugged in to the 110 power. My 220 lead is just dangling. There, I went ahead and did the other side too. There we go, focused. Okay, that wasn't too bad, but now we're gonna switch it over to 220, and I'm gonna show you that. So we're gonna grab some 1/4 inch plate scrap that I got laying around, and we'll probably set it to about 180, 185 amps, and we'll see what that does. So after running a buttload of beads and testing out my settings, I found a little trick with this thing. I find that the voltage is actually too high for the set amperage. And so what I did was I put it on -5. I'm welding 1/4 inch plate right now on only 165. I used to turn it way up to like 200 and it would get super like spattery and stuff, but it's like buttery smooth down here. You have to go a little slower, but check this out. Now I'm gonna do the same thing but pulling. Sometimes this is the funnest part of having a welder, is just playing with the settings and figuring out like what works better in relation with another, and I'm starting to like these results I'm getting. That sucker is hot! So these were just some different techniques I used. That first one, I dipped my nozzle and it pulled some spatter out of the nozzle. But anyway, I mean, this is super thick 1/4 inch crap. I had been playing with all kinds of different settings on the other side too. Yeah, this thing welds pretty good on some pretty beefy metal. This helmet is freaking awesome. I can't believe how much better I can see through this thing than with my old Harbor Freight helmet. And I don't know if you can see, but up here on the sides, there's these extra like viewports. And while they don't auto darken, they are tinted a little bit. So if you want to use this for grinding or plasma cutting, you can get a better field of view, but it doesn't send any of the super bright light from welding through it, which is nice. So anyway, if you want to check one of these out, I'll drop a link down in the description. Take a look at it and get one if you want one. All right, so now we're gonna try some stick welding. This machine uses DC. You can use electrode negative or positive depending on what type of electrodes you're using, but for your common 6010 and 6011 or 7018, you're gonna want electrode positive. So make sure that you've got your stinger plugged into the positive and your work lead in the negative, and we'll give it a shot. I'm really not going to spend a lot of time on the stick welding. So that was 60-10. This is 1/4 inch thick, by the way. And I went right over rust and paint. Tried to do a little bit of gouging, but clearly I'm a little bit off on my settings, but it works. So you guys remember earlier in the video when I said that you can stick weld aluminum with these things. So these are the electrodes I bought, Blue Demon 4043s. They're 1/8 inch. I'm gonna tell you, I tried and tried for like 2 hours to get a bead to show you guys, and let's just say you gotta know what you're doing to use these. So I went ahead and buried that piece of aluminum in the backyard so nobody will ever freaking see it. So like I said, this thing will do it. You just really gotta know what you're doing, and it's really difficult, and it's not for thin metal. This machine will burn those aluminum rods, but good luck to you. So if you got thin stuff you need to glue together, I recommend trying these. They're like aluminum brazing rods. It's called Alumaloy. I got it on Amazon. It has a pretty low melting point, and all you need is a propane torch to use this stuff. And it's not gonna hold up the Empire State Building, but it's pretty strong, and it's definitely worth giving it a try. I will link down to these below. Check them out if you want some. So lastly, we're gonna try some TIG. Like I said, the welder doesn't come with this torch. It's like 40 bucks. So for this, I have a separate gas bottle. It's 100% argon, and the torch actually connects directly to the bottle versus the MIG, which the bottle connects to the back of the machine, and then it feeds it through here. Also, this thing's lift TIG, so there is no pedal, and it is DC. Okay, so for the TIG, what we need to do is pop this off. That's what energizes the MIG. We need to move the ground clamp or work lead over to the positive, hit the torch into the negative, turn on our bottle. We should be good to go. I probably need to fix this tungsten though. I think I tipped it last time. So we're gonna flip this over to lift TIG, which is that light right there. So like I said, this is literally like my second time doing this, so I've just been doing a couple practice runs. Not turning out the best, but I can make it well to show you guys. So with this, it's a lift TIG. You touch it down, you see a tiny little spark, then you pop it up, and that's when the arc starts. And then when you get to the end, you kind of snap it away real quick, and then come back and keep the gas on it for a little while. The gas is right here on the torch. I don't really have the time to figure out why this porosity is so bad. I got a lot to learn still, but we're gonna try it once with this, and then we're gonna move on. But you can see that last one I did was a little better. Still a little bit of porosity at the start and at the end. I had to pull away abruptly because I had my hand too close and it's burning up. So this isn't a machine problem, this is like a me problem. One of these days I'll figure this out, but it ain't today. So I really wanted to show you guys that this thing can TIG weld pretty good. The problem is I'm not the person to do that because I am literally just learning. These were the best two that I could get on regular mild steel, and they're not very good looking. But it is what it is. It didn't work out so well, and unfortunately I don't have any stainless to try that on, but nevertheless, for an entry-level way into TIG welding to get your feet wet, this thing will do it. Sorry I didn't have any better results than that to show you. So now that I've showed you all the processes and my personal pros and cons, what's the verdict? So in the end, I absolutely recommend this Yeswelder Mig-205DS. It's been great for me, and I think it'll be great for you as well. Just keep in mind the limitations that I mentioned. And if you guys have any questions or comments about this welder or anything, just leave them down in the comments below. If you want to see my next favorite fab tool, check out this video right here. Don't forget to hit that like button for me, and I'll see you next time.